Exodus chapter 14. I'm going to read from verses 10 to 15. Okay. As Pharaoh drew near, the sons of Israel looked, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. And they became very frightened. And the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, "Is it because there is no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us in this way, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, 'Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians'? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die here in the wilderness." Verse 13. But Moses said to the people, "Do not fear. Stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptian whom you see today, you will never see again forever. The Lord will fight for you while you keep silent." Okay, so what was Moses' words saying? Okay, so here they are. They're afraid. They're stuck between the Red Sea and the army coming behind them. They're stuck in the middle, and they are fearing for their lives. So Moses is like, just stand. Don't do anything. Stay quiet and just watch. Watch what the Lord does. But look at verse 15, where God replies and responds to Moses. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the sons of Israel to go forward. Verse 16, as for you, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the sons of Israel shall go through the midst of the sea on dry land." So here's Moses. The people are coming to Moses and says, "Hey, what are you doing? We're going to die. What are you going to do?" Moses says, "Hey, just stand there. Don't do anything. Just watch what God does." And it doesn't say this, but it seems like he was like, "Oh no, God, what are you going to do? You got to do something here." Because the next verse says, God said to Moses, "Why are you crying to me?" Okay, so at some point Moses was crying about this. So he told the people, "Do not fear, don't be afraid, stand here, watch what God does." Then he turned, and cried to the Lord, "What are you going to do?" But God's response is amazing. He says, "Why are you crying out to me?" Okay, because he was crying out, he was praying to God about the situation, right? And that's what we're supposed to do, right? If the enemy is coming against us and we're stuck, aren't we supposed to pray? Well, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're supposed to use the authority that God has given us. A lot of times when we have the enemy right behind us, when we have things going on that we're responsible for that seem to be falling apart, the enemy can easily distract us and get us to forget the authority that we carry. Okay, so let me show you another example of this in the New Testament. Now let's go to Mark chapter 4. I'm going to start at verse 35, okay? On that day, when evening came, he said to them, Jesus said to the disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd, they took along with him in the boat, just as he was, the other boats were with him. Verse 37, and there arose a fierce gale of wind. So a big storm came. And the waves were breaking over into the boat so much that the boat was already filling up. Verse 38, Jesus himself was in the stern doing what? Asleep on a cushion. He was sleeping in the midst of the storm. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he got up and rebuked the wind. So Jesus woke up, got up, he rebuked the wind. This is what he said. He said, "Hush, be still." He said, "Peace, be still." He spoke to the storm. He spoke straight into the storm and said, "Peace, be still." And what happened? The wind died down and became perfectly calm. Verse 40, and he said to them, "Why are you still afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They became very much afraid and said to one another, "Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" So, what would you call talking to Jesus? Prayer, right? That's prayer. When you talk to Jesus, you're praying. So here, the disciples, okay, Jesus already gave them a word. He gave them his will, what they're going to do. He says, "Let us go to the other side. Get in the boat and let us go to the other side." So they're already in his will, okay? So don't think just because a storm comes in your life that you are outside of his will. It could be just the opposite. It could be because you are exactly where he wants you to be. Jesus was in the midst of the storm. What was he doing? He was sleeping. Why? How can you sleep in the midst of a storm? Where water is coming in, splashing. The disciples' fears are just up, and they must be freaking out, right? They must be praying, must be doing everything that they knew how to do, but it wasn't working, right? Because their life is at stake. So how can Jesus be sleeping in the midst of this storm? Think about it. Was it because he was just so tired that he just had to sleep? I don't think so. If you think about his heart, where his heart is, because he operated from heavenly places. He was rooted. His mind, his heart was rooted in heavenly places, right? So where he operated from, where he lived from, there was no storms. There is no storms in heaven. So because he had this peace inside, our inward reality will define our outward. If you can gain a peace within you in the midst of a storm, it gives you authority to speak peace into that storm. So the authority that you have inwardly will come out outwardly. Okay? So if you don't have a peace in the midst of your storm, then you're not going to have the authority to calm it. Jesus had a peace in his heart, which is why his inward reality defined the outward. He was able to draw from the authority from within, the reality from within, and bring it outwardly. So you have authority over any storm that you can sleep through. You have authority over any storm that you can remain in peace and trust in. Okay, that gives you authority over the storm. And then he says, he turned to them after they prayed to him, because remember, talking to him in his prayers, said, hey, don't you care that we're going to die? What are you going to do? He gets up, peace be still, turns to them and says, you're still afraid? Where is your faith? This reminds me of the with Exodus and Moses. The same thing. He's like, hey, why aren't you calming the storm? Where is your authority? Did you forget about your staff, your authority that you have, right? Why don't you calm the storm? A lot of times we cry out in prayer to God to save us from something when he is just waiting for us to do something. I'm not saying this is the truth all the time, but many times he is waiting for you to use your staff. He's waiting for you to use your authority to bring peace over the storm. Amen? If you look at it, if you go to the next chapter in chapter 5, you'll see that once they finally got to the other side, they came to this man who was demonically enslaved by hundreds of demons. Okay? This guy was in the tombs. They would try to shackle him, and he would just break them because he had supernatural strength. He would hit himself. He would be screaming. It was very demonic, and it brought a darkness over that whole region. Everybody knew who this guy was. So when Jesus comes and the disciples, they come to the boat, this man sees Jesus, runs up to him, falls on his face. And these demons are afraid, right? They're afraid. They're like, oh, you came to punish us before your time. Please don't punish us. Don't torment us. And they asked him to send them into the swine. And Jesus gave him permission. Because why were these Jews raising pig anyways, right? It's not kosher. So there's something up with that. So once they saw their pigs floating in the water dead, the region didn't like that. They said, you guys need to leave. This man who Jesus freed from all these demons, because he says that he was there clothed and in his right mind. So he was delivered. He was healed. So he wanted to go with Jesus. He came to Jesus and was like, I want to go with you. Jesus didn't allow him to. He said, no, you need to go home and tell the people what God did. Okay? So if you think about from a discipleship standpoint, okay, from a training standpoint, okay, one, Jesus gave them a call, the disciples, to go to the other side, right? They said, okay, we're going on a mission trip. Let's go. In the middle of his will, of the mission trip of where Jesus told him to go, a life-threatening storm comes, okay? So right away, a disciple can think like, You told me to go over here, Lord, and now I'm in this storm. This doesn't make any sense. I'm going to die. What's going on here? So again, that's when he wanted them to use their authority. So now when they get to the other side, now they get greeted by this demonic guy, right? And so they're like, oh, geez. Jesus frees him. Now the city wants them to leave. So this doesn't really seem like a very productive mission trip, okay? One, they're going, they almost get killed. Two, they only deliver this one guy, and then they get kicked out and need to go. Doesn't seem a very fruitful mission trip. Not only that, but this one guy that they did get, Jesus didn't allow him to come. He said, no, stay here. So for a disciple, I don't know, for me, I would think that wasn't a very fruitful mission. And the only disciple that we could have gotten from here, you said not to come. We could have, and then you told him to go minister to the region. I know for many of us, we would want to be like, no, we need to train them. They need to go through all of our classes first. They need to be trained in evangelism. They need to know the word. They need to know all these things before they do that. But that's not the case how Jesus handled it. He said, no, go stay here and go tell people what God did. Okay? He only had this one message. If you think about it, his message that he was probably saying all the time is, hey, remember me? I'm that guy that was in the tombs, naked, with all these demons screaming, remember me? But Jesus came and delivered me. That was his message. I used to be like this. Jesus came and now I'm like this. It was a very powerful message though. So this one man brought a breakthrough for this whole region. So many times when you are in the will of God, storms will come. And I want to encourage you, do not stop. Keep going forward. Use your authority because right around the corner there is a breakthrough. This breakthrough can be not only for you, but for a region. It can be for a group of people, for a family. So be encouraged, be strengthened by this example. And the last scriptures that we went to was Psalm 16. We're going to highlight verses 8 through 11. What he did intentionally and the fruit that produced. Verse 8, I have set the Lord continually before me. That's what he did. He set the Lord continually before him, so that he's always beholding Jesus. He was fixing his eyes on Jesus. What is the fruit? What does this produce when we do this? Let's read on. Because he is at my right hand, this is what happens. I will not be shaken. Verse 9, therefore my heart is glad. My glory rejoices. These are all things that happen when you continually set him before you. My flesh also will dwell in security. You will feel secure. You will feel confident about who you are. For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol. Neither will you allow your Holy One to undergo decay. Verse 11, you will make known to me the path of life, where I'm supposed to go, where I'm going to get life from. In your presence is the fullness of joy. In his presence is the fullness of joy. In your right hand there are pleasures forever. This is how you're going to gain, be reminded of the authority when you're in the struggle. Because like in Exodus, Moses forgot about the staff, the authority that he had, the tools that he was given to fulfill what he was told to do. Just like the disciples, the same thing. They forgot about their authority because they were focused on the storm. They were focused on the problems. Okay? So if instead of focusing on the problems, we focus on potential by setting the Lord continually before us. And that will strengthen us in our inner man. It will remind us of the tools and the authority that we have to gain breakthrough over the problem that we have. Okay? So be encouraged. Continually set the Lord before you. And this is what's going to help you to stay sober-minded and to know exactly what to do in the midst of a storm if you're in a storm. Amen? So be encouraged. If you're in a storm, do not stop. Keep going. Use your authority. Use your authority, use your authority, use your authority. And continually set the Lord before you and behold his beauty. All right? Amen?